Hi, and thanks for downloading the second episode of Parched and Peckish. This is just a small warning to let you know that we had some technical issues during the recording process, and that there's some audio interference that starts around 23 minutes in. You can still hear what we're saying, and I hope it doesn't interfere with your listening too badly. Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Parched and Peckish.
Welcome. For any return listeners, thanks for coming back. And for anyone new to us, thanks for showing up as well.
So after the first episode where we covered our neighbours across the channel, France's attempts, or very successful attempts at beer, craft beer especially, we're now going a little bit further afield, and we're venturing into another part of Europe where they specialise in, well, many things, food and drink based. But we're going to be covering something which is, well, it's a bit unusual to British taste perhaps. But I don't know, Nate, we like IPAs, we like dark chocolate, we like bitter coffee. Mm-hmm. So it kind of makes sense that we would appreciate the bitter spirits or
bitter drinks,
liqueurs.
certainly, and they're coming back, and people will be familiar with some of the incarnations of this particular drink. I don't know if we need to keep people on tenterhooks any longer. You're building this up quite a bit. So it's Amaro, or in the plural, I looked it up, Amari.
Amari,
which sounds like it's kind of love. Amaro, Amari.
Yeah.
Amore. It's not far.
When the moon hits the sky like a big pizza pie.
It's Amari. Could have been in a different incarnation, but yes, Amaro.
So Amaro, which is the Italian word meaning bitter. But Amaros or Amari, I mean, it specifically refers to Italian liqueurs, but there are similar styles of liqueurs from other parts of Europe.
Yes.
Including, as we'll find out today, Germany and...
Is Jägermeister an Amaro?
It is. Technically an Amaro.
Right, yes.
And also vermouth is also technically an Amaro.
I see. I wondered that. I was thinking about whether Amaro and vermouths were of the same family or were considered part of the same family.
They are, yeah.
Right.
But vermouth is specifically made with wine. Whereas most Amari or Amaro, I'm going to keep doing that all podcasts, are made from just a neutral grain spirit.
Right.
Which is then macerated with herbs, barks, spices, and then and sugar is typically added to balance it out. So what we're not talking about here is your kind of Angostura bitters type drink.
Right.
Although the history of them is pretty similar.
Okay, how they evolved.
Yeah, most of these drinks came about as a kind of a tonic or a medicine.
Yes.
To aid digestion or
a digestif or an aperitif kind of thing, waking your stomach up for a meal or settling your stomach down after a meal.
Exactly. Yeah. Or also just as a medicine itself. So that's actually how some of these bitters. So Angostura is a good example. Although that is an alcoholic beverage which I think was available. Or similar beverages were available in America during Prohibition.
Right.
Because they were technically medicines.
I see. So they got around that during Prohibition. But their history started in monasteries, didn't it? It was monks who, like in Belgium with the beer, it was monks making these tinctures, these liqueurs.
Yeah, definitely. And there's, if you go all the way to Chartreuse or something like that, which is an incredibly strong.
Yes, the Green Devil. Yes.
Had some interesting nights with Chartreuse.
Yes, we won't tell that story on this episode, anyways. We'll save it for another time.
After a few Chartreuse, maybe
right.
Our Chartreuse special. So Italy is great at them. I think they range in style from the north to the south of Italy, which is a fascinating journey to go on.
And I imagine that the kinds of things that they use, the ingredients, as it were, vary from place to place. And some of the reading I was doing, it said it really was just things that were local to the area that they would use. And so it makes sense that there's a regionality to Amaro.
Yes.
There is a very regional, much like there is with different kinds of grape varieties, that you have a regionality with Amaro depending on what they've got in the area to flavor the Amaro with.
Yeah, exactly. And that really is a fascinating kind of thing to do. So,
should we taste something?
We should.
We should. We've talked a lot about it. Let's taste something. Now, did you have one picked out in particular? Did you want to go classic? Did you want to go sort of off-piste, sort of new frontier?
Well, I think we'll save New Frontier for a bit later on.
Okay.
I think to go properly classic, we're going to have to go Amaro Montenegro. I love this bottle. I love this. Amaro.
It is. It's this lovely sort of cone-shaped bottle. This beautiful classic label on it. Bologna.
Yes, Bologna. And this one is actually kicks in. It's quite alcoholic, actually. I think it's no. This one's only 23%.
23%. And what does it vary? I think I did a bit of reading. Somewhere between 18 and 30 something percent.
Almost up to 40. Yeah.
Almost up to 40. But there is a minimum somewhere around 18.
Yeah, these are definitely always either fortified wine strength or just a watered down. Grain spirit down to a kind of an acceptable.
And do they use wine as a base for Amaro?
They can do. So the vermouths are, and some Amaros are.
It's lovely licorice that's coming off there. And sort of more famously, our famous Amaros, things like Campari, Fernet Branca.
Fernet Branca, Campari, and I mean Campari is not a subtle drink.
No,
and so I was surprised that it was included in that family, but it most definitely is.
Oh, so that's very tasty.
It's a bit too tasty.
It is. It's riskily tasty. There is sweetness, but then you're getting really dry, bitter herbs. Very, say woody, like a cigar box kind of wood, but. Maybe some maraschino cherry. Are you getting that?
Getting maraschino, yeah, definitely some cherry. And I think the citrus in this there's orange peel, that kind of pith of orange.
It is. It's huge, the orange on that. You'd almost imagine there to be a big chunk. And if I'd been tasting that blind, imagine a great big wedge of orange in there, because it is. And you get orange skin.
Yeah.
The zest, because my mouth is sweating, and it's that sort of sweaty kind of orange peel sort of feel that you get.
But what's interesting about this is I think Campari is a good comparison, because Campari is kind of a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
It's two. It's bitter and it's orangey.
Yeah.
And this has got so much more subtlety to it. This is excellent in cocktails.
Yeah. What kind of cocktail would you have this in?
Well, I like to do something like an Americano with it. So just, vermouth. This with vermouth and then some soda. Or just in a gin and tonic. Or just like how we're having it, which is straight with a lump of ice.
It is delicious, and we're seeing our tastes sort of change. Campari and vermouths were very big sort of in the 60s and the 70s, Cinzano and all of those sorts of things. And our palates are kind of waking up as we get more interested and adventurous in terms of the beers we're drinking, the wines we're drinking. No, the wines have existed, but we're sort of broadening our tastes, and we're coming back. And it's really not a new thing at all, but that we're coming back to these very interesting and unusual spirits and liqueurs that have been around but have sort of fallen out of fashion, and then, as we see later, sort of being reinvented further afield.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense in a way. I mean, Montenegro is a great example of where they've got their recipe completely right, exactly how they want it, and it's so well balanced. In that it balances sweetness and bitterness in a way that the really good double IPA
model
does do. Yeah. But with these herbs and spices coming through, which is great. But bitterness is a really important part of our taste kind of makeup.
Yeah. Well, you're a scientist. You know all about this.
Well, and this is the really interesting part about bitterness is typically it comes from plants which use various compounds to create bitterness to avoid being eaten.
So the very thing that they designed, that they evolved to protect themselves, is the very thing that we're drawn to in terms of the taste.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. And some people have a real sensitivity to bitterness, and I do too. I mean, I've been tested, and my bitterness threshold is very low.
Right.
As in, I can taste bitterness at very low levels.
Yeah.
It just helps that I really love bitterness. So I drink espresso without sugar. I drink, I love these Amaro. I love very tannic wines, and I love double IPAs or anything with an.
And you can hold a grudge for an extremely long period of time. So it's all across your character. I think it's not just a palate thing.
A very bitter individual.
So we've just had that with a little lump of ice that's melted a little bit, and that slipped down. That was delicious. There was the woodiness, the bitterness. There was all kinds of some licorice root. I'm sure we could delve into it more, but absolutely delicious. I've never tasted that before, and I'd very happily sip that. What are we, 23%? That's a lovely, characterful, interesting drink that changes with every sip.
Yeah, it does. And at first taste, it could almost be too sweet, but actually it balances so nicely.
You get the sweetness at the front, and then as it's just about to overpower, you get the lovely bitter finish.
Yeah. Exactly.
Should we move on to you've got a few here. Should we try something else? You've got a couple other Italian ones. You've got this German one that you threatened for us to taste. But what are you thinking? What was your feeling on the next one?
So I thought we'd go a little bit further afield, or a bit unusually, we would go to East Germany, or what is now Germany.
Forgive anyone that's just woken up from a coma from the mid-'80s.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I don't think they'd understand what a podcast was anyway, so we're probably pretty safe for anything like that. Yeah.
So just outside Dresden, there's a small town called Radeberger, which I visited on a work trip a while ago. And for lunch, they took us out to the Radeberger brewery.
What kind of beers do they do out there?
They make an excellent Pilsner. It's world famous, apparently. Very popular in America, they were telling me.
Right.
In 2.5 Men, they drink Radeberger Lager or Pilsner.
Right.
But they also make this, which is a Krauterlikor. And Krauterlikor is German for Amaro.
It says 1877. They've been making it a long time there.
They have. They paused briefly for a few international world events, incidents. But it's back, and with this original recipe, apparently.
Smelling that, it really reminds me of this liqueur, Amaro, out of Dusseldorf that's very popular. They've got alt beer there, but they've also got this Kittelspitch.
Right.
Another slightly interesting name, but Kittelspitch, and that on the nose is Kittelspitch all the way.
There's a lot of spice there, isn't there?
Yeah, very wintry, very deep.
Yeah.
And thick, and
it looks wintry as well. It's very dark brown.
Dark, yeah, much darker than the Montenegro. And more coffee, maybe more chocolate.
Yeah, dried fruits. It's quite different.
Quite potent, quite spicy. Almost like nettles, though, like a nettle, like an earthy sort of wild, overgrown garden kind of spicy. But it tastes exactly, or very, very similar to Kittelspitch from Dusseldorf.
Okay. So that might be what the Germans favour, or the German taste favours, for it's very heavily spiced.
Well, certainly you imagine in the colder climate, this sort of more rich, there's quite a seam of copper or iron coming through. There's a little bit of a metallic kind of minerality with it as well. But definitely denser, more intense. This actually is slightly leaner. I would keep this Kittelspitch in the freezer at home, and would have just a little shot of it after dinner or something like that as a digestif. It really worked really well.
It's not reaching the ridiculous levels of clove that Bekarovka does. So have you ever had Bekarovka from the Czech Republic?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. That's an intense drink.
It's an intense drink.
Yes.
But still very nice, and I do also have this in a gin and tonic as well.
All right, it's just a little splash of it.
Yeah, just to add a little bit of something unusual.
So before we go on to the next Amaro, I noticed this book here, Bitter.
Yeah,
that you've got here.
Well, I thought it would make in kind of an ongoing theme in our podcast. I'd delve into my ridiculous library and put out a relevant book.
Yeah.
So this is Bitter by Jennfier Mclagan. The byline is A Taste of the World's Most Dangerous Flavour with Recipes. And
interesting.
It is really a wonderful book. And she goes through all of the different kinds
hops.
Of bitterness that we, as humans...
It's a picture of hops, sorry. I'm just shouting out. I don't have Tourette's, of hop Tourette's. But yeah,
Squirrel! So yeah, she goes through various different things. So she talks about endives, beer, chicory.
Well, chicory endive?
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. Yeah,
Belgian endive, brassicas, rocket, and so grapefruit.
Yeah.
All of the interestingly, a lot of the flavors which we apply or describe bitterness as. It goes through them all. And
then it's recipes as well.
There are recipes as well, and she does actually go through some recipes using Amaro or types of Amaro, one of which we're not tasting today, but you have mentioned already, which is Fernet Branca,
which is very popular. When I worked in nightclubs some years ago here in London, we went after a particularly rough night, coming in for a shift of the evening. There was a Kosovan Albanian barman, Gaz, who I used to work with, and he introduced me to Fernet Branca, and I came in feeling a bit rough one time, and he said, "Mate, have a shot of this. This will sort you out." And that was my introduction to Fernet Branca.
Fernet Branca is an amazing drink.
Yeah.
It's one of the more extreme
Amaros. Yeah, yes, definitely.
So she's got a recipe here for Fernet Branca chicken livers.
And I see Campari glazed veal chops.
Yeah, and so Campari also comes up a couple of times.
Popular one, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, do you know who else likes Fernet Branca?
I'm sure you'll tell me.
The other person who likes Fernet Branca is Alfred, Batman's butler.
Oh, does he?
As played by Europhobe Michael Caine
right.
in the recent films. I'll just play you a little clip.
All right, yeah.
Remember when you left Gotham? Before all this, before Batman, you were gone 7 years. 7 years I waited, hoping that you wouldn't come back. Every year, I took a holiday. I went to Florence. There's this cafe on the banks of the Arno. Every fine evening, I'd sit there and order a Fernet Branca. I had this fantasy that I would look across the tables and I'd see you there with a wife, maybe a couple of kids. You wouldn't say anything to me, nor me to you. But we both know that you'd made it. That you were happy.
Another old English gent who really likes Fernet Branca is Fergus Henderson of St John Restaurants.
St John's, yes.
And he quite famously makes a Fernet Branca ice cream. If you can imagine how that might taste.
I can. I don't know that our listeners will want to, but yes, I can imagine that. Interesting, but yeah, I guess these drinks that have been around and people are finding new and interesting ways of incorporating them into things because our palates are growing up in a way. Certainly, something we're seeing.
Yeah, definitely. So what I'll do is I'll put the details of this book on the website. So if you want to check out, there are tons of great recipes. There's a lot of recipes with beer, a lot of recipes with brassicas and interesting salads. All of the kind of different bitter foods and drinks that you can think of.
Yeah.
One quote from the book is that bitter or bitterness is the gatekeeper of adult taste. And I think,
right.
Well,
I'd like to think so.
I do. We're sophisticated adults if we like bitter things.
Yes, we can appear that way, certainly.
Yes, definitely.
Certainly. So this has caught my eye, this Astley Brothers of London dispense.
Yeah, and actually this is made with a Pinot Noir vermouth base.
Gotcha. Okay, very interesting. And you were very kindly sent this, I believe, by the Astley Brothers.
Yes. So they're based in South London.
Lovely golden colour.
Yeah,
really kind of sauterne sort of look to it.
It's a lot lighter than some of the other Amaros that we have here, or Amari. So they effectively beta tested by sending out tons of samples to people, and I was involved in that.
Right.
So they sent out an A and a B, and people remarked on or commented on or reviewed which were their favourites and why, and then they based their final recipe around that. I think you can tell this is a little more herbal. Well,
looks like a dessert wine, like a Sauterne or a Barsac or something like that in the glass.
Well, I'll let you see what you think first, taste-wise.
Ooh, that's very intense. That's wow, I wasn't expecting that. It's super dry. There is that cedar bark, licorice root, but everything is bone dry. That's quite shocking, actually. I really wasn't expecting that.
The interesting thing about that is there is actually quite a lot of sugar in it. It's just we're going from the Montenegro and the German Krauterlikor to something which is drier, so there's less sugar in it.
The bitterness is very, very acute, and it is that what we're talking about chicory Belgian endive. That is searing kind of lasting flavors is completely that for me is chicory is endive. Very, very, and I think certainly of the three of them so far, the most, if we're talking about the quote you said before about bitterness being the gateway to adult taste.
Yeah.
This is that gateway in a really pure form. Very, very interesting, and very complex.
Yeah. And dry enough to almost be, kind of an aperitif side of things as well. I think, I know that this is heavy on the hops.
Ah.
So they use hops as a bittering agent in this, as well as rhubarb and a whole host of South London-based.
Right. So they're going back to this sort of tradition that Amaro had of making their Amaro from what they could find locally.
Yeah, I think there is definitely an element to that. They definitely wanted to make it a British drink, but at the same time harnessing that kind of feeling or flavour of Italy.
Yeah, it's a lovely little black apothecary bottle here with a little quart wooden top in it, gold sort of lettering, some of it dispense very clearly, modern British Amaro vintage 2015, handmade with integrity. They make it here in South London.
Yep.
A London-made. We were seeing gins, we're seeing vodkas, certainly made in London, but something, and there are some vermouths and stuff I think being made in North London that I've had.
Yeah.
But this is very, very, very interesting, and certainly worthy of checking out if you got sort of drink geek friends.
Interestingly as well, we were talking about Fernet earlier. There is a Fernet which I was hoping they might be able to send us, but it's not ready yet. It'll be ready soon for beta testing as well, I believe.
Right. So this is something that they do. They send it out for testing before they actually release it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think because Amaro or bitter drinks like this are such an acquired adult taste, if you like,
niche, very niche.
You really need to get it right, which is what they've tried to do, and I think succeeded in making a very unique and delicious drink. And you're right about the length. I'm still tasting it now.
Yeah, it is. It just goes on and on and on. It's just bursting in your mouth like this whole kind of vivacious, vegetal, but spicy and bitter kind of explosion in there. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the last one we're going to taste, I picked up in a little restaurant in Rome called Roscioli, I think. I think that's the pronunciation. So Roscioli is a deli by day and a restaurant by night. So when you go in to eat your meal, you're sat with the deli counter fridge by your right or left cheek, depending on which part of the restaurant you're in. When you order your bottle of wine, the waiter runs out the front door to the wine shop round the corner, which is owned by the same family, to bring your wine round. And the food is fantastic. They basically just take what they've got behind the counter of the deli, put it on a plate and give it to you.
Right.
So even after the starter of burrata with local cherry tomatoes, you're absolutely full.
Right.
And then they bring out the guanciale carbonara And then they try and force some, tiramisu or some other delicious Italian.
And then eventually there's limoncello is always
limoncello, or you ask for something which will settle your stomach. And this is when the waitress said, "Well, I'll give you a shot of my favourite, which is this Amaro Tonico digestive from Varnelli."
It's a beautiful bottle. I think it's certainly this dispense bottle is very nice, but this is classic. It's got the sort of the pop cap on the top, the
ceramic,
the ceramic ceramic top on it, and this lovely oldie sort of world label on it. Lovely writing, Herborista. On there, but 21%. Love the look of it.
So Varnelli make quite a few different Amari, and this one is definitely the most, let's say, medicinal.
Right. And you slightly warned me about this, but I've been so taken with the lovely bottle. But again, so in color, it's kind of like an iced tea.
Yeah, it's a muddy brown.
Yes, well, that's another way of describing iced tea, I suppose. Less romantic, maybe, perhaps. But yes, I'm sure people will get that. That, to me, smells like Fernet Branca.
Right.
That smells to me the most of Fernet Branca of any of them. That intense, almost aggressive herbal nose. Really earthy, wet kind of garden sort of. Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. It's like, sometimes it reminds me of. There's times when I've gone out into the garden and I've seen things growing and I wasn't sure whether they were salad leaves or weeds.
Yeah.
And I've tasted a little bit of it and I went, "Oh, that's a weed." That's what that reminds me of. It was interesting having all of these and because Fernet Branca obviously features so prominently in Amari in the Amari world and we hadn't had anything like that, and this is definitely in that class, dry and like it is like sucking on weeds. Weeds.
It's great, isn't it? This really harnesses that element of plants producing a compound which is not supposed to be pleasant.
Yeah, and it's right on the edge, but there is a sort of a caramel sweetness, sort of hidden amongst these really sort of broad green, slightly stalky sort of leaves. But it isn't unpleasant in any way. I think I've maybe sold it a bit wrong, but it is so. It's speaking very truthfully from what it's made from in a way that the other ones quite aren't shouting that loud. This is certainly saying that the loudest in terms of its roots. And no pun intended.
Well, I also think that it's lifted by, again, a mintiness that's almost refreshing.
There is really on the finish, isn't there? It's like a spearmint. It's like a winter fresh mint. Yeah.
And so the herbs and spices and barks and things they use to make this one are roasted on an open fire. And I think there's a slight smokiness or a roastedness there as well.
It concentrates it at the end, and it's like that camp. I don't know if people are familiar with it, like camp coffee, which I think is made from chicory, dried chicory. Yeah. And that's really what you're getting on the finish.
To describe Nate's face when he first sipped this, there's a painting, and at the moment I can't remember the name of the painter, but the title of the painting is "The Bitter Potion," and I'll put a picture of it up on the website, and you can imagine what Nate was reaction was when he first tasted this. It's such a wide range of flavours.
Yeah,
what we've tasted today.
It's so broad. Yeah,
I really think that there's an Amaro for everyone.
And really something, if you're looking to engage with, you're having a dinner party or a few friends over who are into their drinks. Amaro is such a broad and fascinating world. There's literally, like you said, there's something really for everyone there, and a lot to discover.
Definitely. So I hope we've inspired you to try some Amaro or some Krauterlikor or even some new British spirits.
Yeah. If you want to find out about any stockists for any of the Amari we tasted today, you can go to www.parchedandpeckish.com, where there'll be photos of the bottles, and if you can get them here in the UK, where you can get them. So, check it out.
Thanks for listening.
Ciao.
Ciao.